Has this come as a surprise to you?
It's come as a little bit of surprise in terms of the timing. We heard some rumblings of this potentially happening when we were in Austria about 10 days ago, the previous Grand Prix before the British Grand Prix. There was a lot of talk about division in the camp, about, particularly coming from, should we say, the wider Verstappen camp, led by his father Jos, who, publicly didn't get on with Christian Horner. So we heard there was a lot of friction going on there, but I have to admit, I was surprised by the timing. I didn't think this would be something that would unfold mid-season, but here we are, and I'm sure it's been a bit of a shock to Christian. So I'm not surprised to have heard both Craig and David talking about it being an emotional day for everyone in Milton Keynes.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your feeling, Karun? Has this decision been made because of Red Bull's performance, or do you think it's something else?
I think there's clearly a variety of factors that have come into play here. I think this is something that we were sort of hearing of a lot of division in the camp since Bahrain last year. Obviously, those allegations of inappropriate behavior came out for Christian, something which he's strongly denied. He was cleared by an internal investigation into that, we must add. So, but at that stage, there was clearly a public showing of an internal war between certain parts of Red Bull and Christian. He had the backing of Shalom Uvidia, the Thai majority owners of the Red Bull parent company. It seemed like things had settled down, and they sort of put the team back together. They won the World Championship. It was the Drivers' Championship last year with Max. Didn't win the Constructors. So then you start to question, they've got a situation now where a huge amount of focus in that team is on Max Verstappen. Without Max Verstappen, that team will be struggling. Yuki Tsunoda finished last in the last couple of races. His predecessors, Sergio Perez, Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon, all good drivers with other teams, but they haven't been able to compete against Max or be anywhere close to Max. So suddenly it's put a huge amount of power within that team on Max Verstappen and his camp and his team. So really, if Max leaves, today Red Bull would have been fourth or fifth in the championship, and maybe Christians had to now carry the blame and carry the can for some of that. But as I say, none of this has been confirmed publicly. None of this is something that we know today. The news only broke, 2 hours and 10 minutes ago. So it'll all come out in the wash, I'm sure.
Karun, you mentioned briefly Jos Verstappen, and there you've talked about the importance of Max Verstappen to the Red Bull team. That relationship between the Verstappen camp and Horner, do you think it's ever truly recovered?
It doesn't seem like it. I think, Jos has been pretty vocal about the fact that he doesn't see Christian as the person to be leading that team. I think they're slightly concerned and annoyed about the fact that the McLaren is clearly the best car. I mean, Verstappen has done an outstanding job to win 2 Grand Prix this year. His qualifying lap to take pole position at the British Grand Prix just 4 days ago was unbelievable. So, Max is, in my opinion, still the number one driver on the grid today. But I can understand if you're the number one driver, you're annoyed about the fact that you are quite some way behind in the Drivers' Championship. And, ultimately the person leading that team has got to carry some responsibility for not giving you those tools to be fighting for the Drivers' World Championship.
Yeah, and this has obviously also brought to light again the questions around Max's future. We know Mercedes are interested in Verstappen. Will Horner's departure make a big difference when he decides what happens to him next?
These are all part of the questions, as I say, with the fallout that's going to come in the next few days. These are all questions that will be answered. Christian himself, even on Friday last week, said very openly, Max Verstappen has a contract with Red Bull and he's not going anywhere else. Now, obviously, Christian's not there anymore. Does that have an effect? I don't know. My gut tells me that Max will now stay at Red Bull in 2026, and then we'll see what happens beyond that. But it's only my gut feeling at the moment.
Gut feelings, educated guesses. I know we're putting you on the spot a bit here. These are big questions, as you said, that are going to be answered as time goes on. We're still reacting to the news, though, of Christian Horner being sacked as team principal of Red Bull. The question then, which you do know the answer to, I'm sure, and which you can sum up for us, is what is his legacy from his time at Red Bull?
Christian has been one of the most successful team principals, not just in the history of F1, but most certainly in the modern history. 20 years at the helm of that team, delivered 14 world championships in total. That's a fantastic record. But I think you have to look at where they started. He was put in place as a 31-year-old in charge of the team, taking over from Jaguar Racing when Red Bull bought it in 2005. And the team were in a complete mess. I was a test driver at Red Bull in 2007 and 8. Christian gave me my first ever F1 test. He came to Barcelona to that test. And I remember at the time, I was a young driver in Formula 2, being surprised that the big boss had come to watch, this little test in winter testing. But it was Christian's choice to come and be a part of every day that the cars were out on track and watch and oversee every part of this building up process. He went out there and tempted Adrian Newey to join the team. And that was a key point, where Red Bull went from being this semi-serious sort of energy drinks fun team to being a serious world championship contender. And of course, they did that 4 times in a row with Sebastian Vettel and then with Max Verstappen. So I think Christian's contribution to that operation cannot be underestimated. And, he undoubtedly has done a fantastic job for that Red Bull team.
What do you think is next for Horner?
Well, I think, the first thing is, does he want a little bit of time away? He's been in the pressure cooker of Formula One for 20 years at the forefront. He's never missed a race, famously, at Red Bull. We hear of other team bosses, Zach Brown, Toto Wolff, occasionally not going to a race. Christian has not missed a race since he was in charge of Red Bull at the first Grand Prix of 2005. So, it's been a long time. So perhaps he wants a little bit of time out. Could he go to Ferrari? There were lots of rumors that they would try to hire him on various occasions. It didn't happen. Fred Vasseur, lots of rumors about his future. Personally, I don't think he'll go there. Could he end up at Alpine? In terms of his personal life, he could carry on living in the UK. Does he want to uproot his children? Does he want to uproot his entire life? Probably not. Alpine, still based in that Oxfordshire Valley, of Motorsport Valley here in the UK, and they're looking for a team principal. They've hired Steve Nielsen as an MD. Christian's old friend, Flavio Briatore, is in charge as a sort of executive consultant. But that could be a future destination for Christian Horner if he does choose, of course, to carry on in the pressure cooker of Formula One.
What about Red Bull and their future? Is the appointment of Laurent Mekies a good one, do you think?
I think it's a logical one in the interim. Laurent is a very smart individual, an engineering background. He's been at Racing Bulls in recent times, but previously he was at Ferrari, he was at Toro Rosso, he was at the FIA. So, he's got a huge amount of experience, and he is absolutely the right choice, I believe, to have been put in place as a CEO. Whether long term, when all this shakes out, whether he then evolves that position into a role of team principal, or they have a separate team principal to sit alongside him as a CEO, is one to be seen. I think we should point out Red Bull are in a transition phase. They've lost a lot of key figures, not just Christian that we're talking about today. Adrian Newey, Jonathan Wheatley, Rob Marshall, their technical leaders, all who have gone in the last 2 years, and they're about to become an engine manufacturer as well. So that'll make them one of only 3 teams alongside Ferrari and Mercedes where everything is done in-house. And that's a massive, massive change. So maybe they will decide that they need a CEO to look after the big group picture alongside a team principal. So a lot going on at Milton Keynes at the moment.